Okay, good morning, everyone. So we're doing today just Hilchos Pesach without the Dvar Torah before in order to accomplish as much as we can. I'm using Rav Shlomo Zalman's Psakim as usual, a book called Shalmei Moed, which was published by Freund or something like that. Yeah, Rav Tuvia Freund. I don't know who he is, but he did a very good job compiling from different books of Rav Shlomo Zalman, all the psakim related to the Moadim in general. He has a book on Shabbos, all kinds of different topics in different volumes. So Shalmei Moed is the book on the Chagim. So a nice portion of it is, of course, related to Pesach. We did last time the Bdika and the Mechira and all that. Beforehand, we did the Birkas Ilanos, which, by the way, just reminding everyone, we could have done it yesterday, according to Shlomo Zalman, even on Shabbos. Whatever didn't has the opportunity all throughout this month of Nisan. Best if you do it as soon as possible. As Rizin Magdim Lemitzos. So best if you find two blossoming trees. It's not difficult to find Baruch Hashem in Israel blossoming trees. You find two of them and you say the bracha. It's a great simcha. I was fortunate to do it yesterday with my family, part of my family, the ones that were here Shabbat, in a backyard of a person in our street in Benton. So it's a nice mitzvah to accomplish. We'll start today with something that's related mainly to Chol HaMoed Pesach, and that is a very common food that many of us eat during Pesach is a matzah brai, where you break matzah into small pieces. There are two ways of making it. Those who eat gebroks, those who eat shuya, that they don't mind having a matzah soaked in water or milk or any soup, any liquid, which is probably first of all, the most common custom, because most Jews, Sephardim for sure, and within the Ashkenaz, among the Ashkenazim, most Ashkenazim eat shruya, eat gebroks, which is totally fine. It's very difficult to understand the reason why not. It was established by the Baal Tanya, Shulchan Aruch Harav, which is very recent compared to other minhagim and customs that come much more ancient, if not from the days of Chazal, so at least Hitniot, like 700 years ago. Here we're talking about 200 or so years ago, 250 years ago, that this all started because of the fear that maybe part of the matzah isn't fully baked when we get it, when we buy it. And if it's not fully baked, then that area which is not fully baked could then become chametz if you dip it in a liquid, especially hot liquid. Then it can cause it to rise or to continue baking beyond the 18 minutes that it was already in the oven. And then it can become chametz. It's a very rare situation. Nowadays, the matzah we get in the boxes or the handmade matzah are well baked, well done, sometimes too well baked. There's a lot of burnt parts on it. And then my wife is conscientious health-wise, so she punches those puffed lines of matzah, punches them all out, and then gets rid of the burnt part of the matzah. It's not simple to do that on Shabbat. Chol HaMoed for sure, yes, and even Yom Tov, yes, but Shabbat, that could be a problem with borer. Be careful because you're gonna tilt over the matzah with all those crumbs after punching those puffed areas. So you're getting rid of the psolet in order to eat the ochel. It's like borer. You're separating between bad and good. and throwing away the bad. So dafka according to Shulchan Aruch Harav Balatanya, that would still be, I'm just thinking of it as I'm speaking now, that would still be okay because you're holding on to the matzah. That's what's in your hand. And the rest gets thrown off. He holds that anything that remains with you is considered what you separated from the other stuff. That's always how he defines what was separated from what. Because you could argue both ways. You could say I took the matzah away from those crumbs, those burnt crumbs, or I separated the burnt crumbs from the matzah. You can look at it both ways. So according to Shulchan Aruch Harav, we always consider what's left in our hand or left on top if we sift something. So that's a kli. So anyway, we're not allowed to because of bora b'kli. But regardless of the kli of the utensil, if we would sift stuff that through a funnel and through a filter. Thank you, a filter. So the whatever remains on top, according to Shulchan Aruch Harav, whatever remains on top is considered what we took away, what we separated from the stuff that fell down. That's always how he considers it.
That was his Kiddush?
Yeah, it's his.
Say that.
It may be in the Rishonim, but I'm not familiar. I know that was his Pesach. That's what's considered Ochel Mipsaret or Psaret Me'ochel. The way you define which from which is what remains in your hand or remains on top.
That's 250 years. Are there do with him?
Zero. So
it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's not so controversial.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. The Mishnah Berurah.
It's like heads or tails. There's nothing a coin in there. Which way you want to look at it?
Right. Both ways could be true and understandable. Now, the Mishnah Berurah, there's a contradiction between two places. One is in Hilchos Bor in Shin Yutet, and the other is in the Hakdama, the introduction to Hilchos Shabbos, where he mentions all kinds of halachos that people aren't careful about on Shabbos, where he mentions the Yaro Dvash, Rabbi Yonatan Eibeshitz, who says that a person who doesn't study Hilchos Shabbos is ought to violate every single Shabbat. It can't be otherwise. If you don't learn the halachos, you're not familiar with every detail, it has to be that you violate Shabbat because you're not, without realizing, you don't know that this is the problem and you do it. So in that passage in the introduction to Chelek Gimel Mishnah Berurah, he writes a few cases that people commonly don't realize that they're doing a mistake. And one of them is borer. And the way he defines borer there is different than the way he defines it in actual Hilchos Borer in Shin Yutet in the Shulchan Aruch, regarding what is considered ochel psaret me'ochel, which is considered to separate which from which. So in the end, bottom line of the understanding that the poskim have in the Mishnah Berurah is that it depends whether the sifting and the separating happens automatically, like with a sift, where you pour it all on top of the filter or whatever, and then the stuff that remains on top, that's where he agrees with Shulchan Aruch Harav. The stuff that remains on top is considered the stuff I separated from the stuff that fell down. So if it's the bugs that stay up, what?
The stuff you want.
It depends. It depends if it's what I want, if I don't want. If the bugs remain on top and the flour sifted down, so it's psolet me'ochel. You separated the bad from the good. If the opposite, you have like you're sifting something thicker, that you don't want the thin particles. You want them to go down. You really want the thicker particles to remain on top. So you're doing ochel psolet. It all depends. Whatever stays up on top, that's what you're separating from whatever falls down. And it depends what's on top, if it's something good or something bad. But we said in any case, it's all non-permissible to do it this way because of the kli, because of the utensil, no matter if it's good from bad or bad from good, you're not allowed to because of the utensil. Anyway, but say the poskim in the name of Mishnah, understand the Mishnah Berurah, and that answers the contradiction, that if you deliberately do an action doing an action with your hands to throw away something out of the mixture, to separate the mixture by deliberately throwing something out, that doesn't matter that you're left in your hand with the good. If you threw away the bad by action, then that's considered bad from good, separating bad from good, even though the good remained in your hand and the bad went away. That's why he argues against the Shulchan Aruch Harav, Tanya, because he says that you cannot consider good from bad, because you deliberately threw away the bad and act with action. That makes also a lot of sense. So I'll just give an example. That's like when you have a can of pickles. Well, that's anyway not borer because they're big. Let's say a can of olives. You open it on Shabbat, and now you want to throw away the liquid. There's a lot of liquid there. You want to throw it away. According to Shulchan Aruch Harav, you would be allowed to, because when you pour it over you're keeping the olives. The olives remain with you in your hand, so that's good from bad. You're allowed to do it. According to Mishnah Berurah, you would not be allowed to do it, because your action is to deliberately throw away the liquid, so you're separating the liquid from the olives, and that's bad from good, so you can't do that. That's good enough to it. In this case, your intention, well, also by sifting, your intention is just to remain with what you want. So it's not enough. It has to be, how do we define the action within your intention? Is it to separate this from that or that from that? That's how it is. Right. That would be the situation. Yeah.
It seems like it could be problematic for a number of ways. In a sense, you don't want to keep either one. You just want to throw them away in different directions. This goes in recycling, this goes in recycling, but they don't go together.
That's okay. That's allowed, because you don't want either of them. You're throwing them both away. So that's not solet me'ochen. You're not separating bad from good. It's bad from bad. Just you want to recycle them in different garbages.
In the other cases where you want them both, you just don't want them together.
That's more problematic. If you want them both, or you don't want them together, that is boring. That's like separating forks, knives, spoons in their compartments. You want them both, but that's total boring. According to most poskim, there are some lenient poskim. Most poskim hold that it's boring. That's completely boring. Yeah, we won't go into that. It's not so simple. Even one at a time is still boring. You have to make sure they're wet, and then you're drying them one at a time. If you're drying them one at a time, then you're taking out whatever comes out, you're drying it, and now that's the only thing in your hand. There's no bunch anymore. It's not part of a bunch, so then you can put it into place. That's how it works there. Okay, we went off on a tangent. Let's go back to Pesach. So matzah. This is because of my wife punching the the burnt areas of the matzah. So I just said that if you punch them out and then you air it out, you sort of tilt it over and let all those crumbs fall down and remain with a less burnt matzah in your hand. So the burnt stuff, you deliberately are throwing it away. You're doing an action to get rid of it. So that would be considered, according to Shulchan Aruch Harav, it would still be allowed. So if you're a Chabadnik, you could do it even on Shabbat. But according to Mishnah Berurah, the way most poskim explain the Mishnah Berurah, this would be a problem of boring, because it's separating bad from good, because your action is to deliberately, you're doing an action to separate, to throw away the bad. That would not be allowed. On Shabbat, it wouldn't be recommendable to do that. Maybe prepare before Shabbat, some matzahs that way, and then it'll be okay. Okay, so now for matzah brai. So I said the way it's done is mainly two ways, the way it's prepared. For those who don't consider it a problem to soak matzah in liquid, they don't hold of shruya, their custom, their family custom is not to refrain from wetting their matzah. So many times the matzah brai is made by first cooking the matzah, or at least soaking it in milk or water. You soften up the matzah that way, and then you fry it with egg, break it into small pieces, fry it with egg, add some spices, and then you've got your matzah bread.
And the bracha is?
In that case, the bracha is, according to all poskim, no question, mizonos. Why is it according to all poskim mizonos? Because what happened when you were soaking it in water, what's that? And you do it this way. You do it with the first cooking it. It's not actually soaking isn't enough. It's cooking. It has to go through a cooking process, meaning if it's hot water or hot milk.
Bagels are boiled and baked.
So it depends the order. It depends on the order, exactly. If you say boiled and then baked, then it's a motzi. But here, after baking the matzah, it's now cooked because it's cooked in the hot water or hot milk before you fry it. The frying of the matzah with the egg is not considered a process that returns it back to a motzi. Baking.
Cooked, the rubbing's soaked. What do you mean it's cooked?
So
soaked. I mean, tablets it's soaked. It's not. I mean, my wife and my mother, my whatever. They soak it. They don't cook it.
It's not hot water. It's cold water.
You know what? I'm not so close to the kitchen.
Okay.
Consumption.
Right.
Cold water.
Cold water.
It must be the actual frying it.
Yeah, but it's originally the matzah was originally baked.
Of course, it's really baked. But anything that was baked and then goes through cooking loses its status as bread and becomes mizonos, as long, but with one condition, that the pieces are less than kazait, which is 2/3 of a matzah, of a machine-made matzah. 2/3 of a machine matzah, that's huge. So the pieces are mostly broken, smaller than 2/3 of a matzah. So, no, I'm saying within the process of making it. No, you can make it whole, a whole matzah, and make matzah by that way. When you eat it, it doesn't matter anymore. The definition is the way it's made. If it's made with a 2/3 of a matzah and a few layers, then it remains a motzi, even if it's cooked. Right, exactly.
You use a whole sheet.
Exactly, and you make layers of them one on top of the other. Oh, now it depends. So the broken up matzah, if it was cooked within the process of making it, which is interesting, the question would be if in cold water, just soaking it in water or soaking it in milk, does that make it does that change it to mizonos?
You'll ask the ladies tomorrow what they do.
If that would, excuse me.
Yes, sure.
If that would do.
We lost you, Danny. For some reason, we can't hear you. Dr. Wise?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Now, yes.
Okay, so that would mean if you have hot soup and you broke up pieces of matzah instead of croutons, you break up matzah, then you're saying it would no longer be hamotzi if that's the case. Now it'd be mazona.
No, so that's not true because it's klisheni, at least, if not klishlishi.
Okay.
The soup in your bowl is right, at least klisheni, if not klishlishi, because it depends on the ladle.
But you just said cold would potentially make it mazona. So if cold, well then certainly hot klisheni should be.
No, so I think it's not true. I think it's not true. It has to be hot. Because cooking, it definitely has to be hot. If it's in boiling water or boiling milk that is soaked in before it's fried, then that's considered cooking, and that's then turns it into mizonos.
Anybody boils some water
before they soak the matzah?
Just want to get it wet.
Just want to get it wet, right? Right. And in the milk also, you don't want to absorb the taste of the milk. No? You're not doing that. Okay, so if it's not boiled.
I was thinking along on those.
Okay. I understand. That's where you know your kitchen business from. Okay. There's some advantage. There's an advantage to your marrying. You're not a cook. All right. Anyway, right. So definitely if it's cold, it doesn't work. It doesn't change the status of it being hamotzi. So then we're actually talking about so it doesn't matter the way you prepare it, actually. It doesn't matter. I thought it would matter between those who hold of shur, those who don't hold of shur, but it really doesn't matter. If it's soaked with cold water or cold milk, it doesn't change the status. It's not cooked. The moment it's cooked and it's less than a kazait, that's when it changes status to mizonos. So now we have to discuss the frying process itself. So if we're going to fry it in deep oil, deep frying, which would mean either the matzah is floating. If it's floating over the oil, it's not touching the surface of the pan, or it's covered with oil from both sides. Both of those situations would be considered a large amount of oil, and that itself is considered cooking. What's the difference if cooking in water, cooking in oil? It's being cooked now. And therefore, that's a definite mizonos bracha over the matzah brai. I think it's not so healthy to do it this way. It's a lot of frying in deep oil is not healthy. But if it's done that way, it's tastier, I guess. But if it's done that way, then it's mizonos, providing the pieces were broken to less than kazait, which is less than 2/3 of a matzah, which is definitely by a matzah brai, almost always made that way. So that's a mizonos. Another clear-cut situation of a bracha is when it's fried without any oil or a teeny amount of oil that just makes it not stick. You're putting it not to stick to the surface of the pan, but nothing at all to add any taste or make it any substantial amount whatsoever. Then it's a definite hamotzi, even though it's broken into pieces smaller than a kazait. It's like if you eat a crumb of bread, it's a hamotzi.
I think that's a popular way.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing it.
That's the way most people
Okay.
I've been doing it.
If that's the way most people do it, then it's always hamotzi. No matter how large or small the sizes of the broken matzah are, it's always hamotzi. The questionable situation is when you have a little bit more oil than just on the above, just touching the surface, it shouldn't stick. There's a little bit more oil than that, and that's tricky because it could happen that either by mistake you pour a little bit more oil than just refraining from sticking, or you want a little bit of that taste of the fried taste in the matzah, so you want a little bit more than oil than just preventing it from sticking. If it's a little bit more. Yeah, and we can't even have matzah right now. It's past Rosh Chodesh, it's past Purim, so none of us would have matzah now till Pesach. Till Pesach. Not even matzah brai? Not even matzah brai. Okay, maybe, okay. Anyway, so when it's the middle amount, in between amount of oil, that's where we get into trouble because we're uncertain whether this is an amount that would be considered already, cooking, we said, is only if it's, no, I guess that itself is a question of whether it's cooking or not.
At the end of the day, the amount of oil changes. A lot of oil, whatever that food is.
Right.
Changes.
Right, exactly. So I'm saying the problematic situation is the middle amount when it's not soaking in oil, not deep fried, but it's not just in order to prevent the sticking up. If it's in the middle.
Frying and cooking are not synonyms? Not the same thing? Halacha?
It depends. No, frying and cooking itself, no. It's two different things. Like you have yesh bishul achar tigun, yesh tigun achar bishul. They're definitely not considered the same. Only deep fried is considered cooking. Yeah.
We had that issue when we talked about croutons. Remember we talked about croutons and how whether they're mezonot or hamotzi. You said it depends if they're the deep fried kind or they're just a lightly. Let's say
Right,
deep
correct.
fried first. Yeah.
Exactly.
So they're deep fried
Exactly.
croutons with this logic. That's the Shabbos for tigul for frying. It's not chayim misa.
Hilchos Shabbos,
Not
frying.
the same bishul.
No, but that doesn't mean it's not deraisa. Because dot, we have the av,
Right.
which is, by the way, the av in the Mishnah is ofeh, baking. It doesn't even say cooking. So you can say, according to that,
they
the cooking.
cook the dyes, make the tchelet to make everything. They cook the dyes.
So what?
That was real cooking.
Exactly. So we learn from this that it's not necessarily the word that's written in the Lametet of Os Malacha is the deoraita and all the rest of the Rabbanan. It's not, doesn't go that way. There's avot. And by the way, even by the avot here, we have two synonym avot, which is baking and cooking. They're both avot of the same category. It's not the 40th, it's 39, but it's the same exact av. And then you have toladot, which are similar actions, which lead to the same idea, but they're so close, they look so much like the av that even they're right. And even Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish held that there were 39 tolados to every single av.
They didn't mention them.
They counted them themselves, 3.5 years it took them, but they never listed what they are. But we're definitely sure that frying is a tolada. It's not derabanan. It's definitely deoraita. But it's not an av because it wasn't in the Mishkan itself. But it doesn't mean that it's not deoraita. It's still deoraita. But it's not the same process. So according to Ashkenazim, yesh tigun achar afiyah or achar bishul, because it gives it a different taste, a different texture, a different entity than the other way you do it.
Not to get off on a tangent, but with Hashra, violating a Tolda.
Yes. Sure, definitely. The only difference between an av and a tolada, the only difference is, are you chayiv two chataot if you do it b'shogeg when you got a tra? No, sorry, without a tra. Because show you without a tra. You did it without remembering in between that it's not allowed. So if it's the av and tolada, the same category, it's under the same line of melacha, then it's one chatat. And if it's a tolada of a different av, you're doing tying a double knot, a certain knot that makes it doraita. We don't get into knotting on Shabbat. You make a knot that makes it doraita, and you fry something, and all in the same shogeg process. You didn't realize in between that it's Shabbos, let's say, you forgot it's Shabbos. So then you have two chatot because it's an av and a tolada that's not related to that av. Tying and cooking are two separate dishes totally. So you have two chatot, right?
Can I ask a question on the topic of the bracha?
Yes,
so
yes. Back to that.
Similar to the matzah brei situation, you make matzah lasagna. So you put a matzah down, maybe you break it up into pieces.
Yeah.
Right. Then you put a layer of tomato sauce, and then you put some cheese, and then again, over and over, the same three. So it's true it's being put in an oven, but the matzah may be more cooked, and because it's got this liquid sitting on top of it. In fact, by the time you put it in the oven, the bottom layer for sure has turned mushy, and often the top layer if you don't put it in the oven right away. So does that still remain hamotzi, assuming you're broken the pieces up smaller than a kazait? Or now is it kind of like the matzah brei situation? It might even become a zono.
No, that would remain a motzi, I believe. First of all, because many times the size is at least 2/3 of a matzah in such a case, because you don't break it into small pieces. You leave it like whole as a whole layer of matzah. So that would anyway be motzi.
But assuming you didn't do that.
Okay, assuming you broke it to half a piece, half a matzah, half of a machine-made matzah, which would be less than a kazait, and made your lasagna that way. I would say, yeah, it could happen that way if you want thinner pieces. So I would say then, but it still would remain hamotzi because, again, by soaking it in the tomato sauce, we just said from before that soaking is not enough to make it mizonos. It's not considered mizonos because it's cold. When you first set them in layers, they're cold. The moment you start baking it, so it's a baking process. Now that it's all being baked together, so you're not cooking. It's not a cooking process. Many breads are somewhat damp a little bit.
Can argue that baking is different. Baking, I'm taking flour and water, which has one form, and I'm chemically changing it when I'm subjecting it to the heat of baking. Here, the matzah is still matzah. The matzah doesn't change. It obviously matzah becomes softer because it's got the liquid on it and it's got the cheese on it. But I'm not changing the matzah. I'm baking the cheese maybe. That'll change. I may even baking the tomato sauce. I wouldn't say that I'm baking the matzah. The matzah.
No, so even. Okay, so you're more so.
No, if anything, I'm cooking it. I'm not baking it. I'm cooking it. I'm subjecting it to a liquid that's hot in the oven. Who cares whether it's hot when I first put it on or it becomes hot afterwards?
Yeah, I understand, but
tomato sauce.
Right. No, but Dr. Weiss is, I know, but he's not talking about the first time you put the layers one on top of it. He's talking about the fact that now it's hot in the oven with the liquid on it. But I understand your point. I'll compare it, I'll compare it to, and this would be the answer. I'll compare it to making pizza. Making pizza, you first have the dough of the bread, which is the bottom layer of the pizza.
Yeah, but that's dough. Dough is itself is being changed in the heat. Here, the matzah is not being changed. Matzah is not being baked more.
I understand,
but the
dough. Okay, but the dough, why are you considering it baking? If it's the tomato sauce and cheese that makes it damp and wet and liquidy, as you're baking, quote unquote, it's really cooking. Why would it be considered baking? If you take a dough, this is a real true halacha. This is important to know. If you take a dough that wasn't baked yet, cooked yet, nothing, and you deep fry it or cook it, it's mizonos, completely mizonos. That's when that's the sure case of mizonos rolls. Many times mizonos rolls are really a motzi, but the sure case of mizonos rolls are rolls that were the dough was deep fried or cooked, and now it looks like a roll.
So why are bagels?
It's like a total roll. Bagels because they're baked, but they're baked after they're fried, as far as I know.
Baked after they're fried.
Right.
No, they're boiled.
They're boiled and then baked, right? The fact that they're baked last makes them a motzi. But if it's only deep fried or only boiled, it's mizonos.
That's the definition of a donut. That's what a donut is.
Okay, exactly.
A donut is taking
just boiled.
Right. Or deep fried, exactly. That's why a donut is mizonos.
But they're also baked.
No.
They become
bagels. They become bagels.
They'll become bagels.
I've been in the factory. I've seen it.
Okay, I would say that in the case of the donut or whatever, or in the case of the pizza, the dough, which is raw dough when you start out, you can argue it's undergoing two things at the same time. It's partly being cooked because it's being heated with the liquid meat within liquid. It's also being baked. So you could say the baking wins. And that's why it's under the mizonot or hamotzi rules. But here, the matzah is not being changed. It's already matzah. And if there's no afiyah after afiyah, you're done. The only thing happening now is the cooking.
Yeah, but I'm trying to point out that it's not considered cooking. That's what I'm trying to point out. That the little amount of liquid that's inside that's mixed in with the tomato sauce or cheese, that little amount of liquid is not considered cooking the matzah. That's what I'm trying to point out. It's just giving it some taste, some flavor, but it's not cooking. Cooking.
So if I took a pot of pasta sauce and I would cook it up, right? People often make it hot. If it were during the year, I would heat it up and I'd throw it on spaghetti, let's say, right? So if I take a pot of pasta sauce, I've cooked it up, I've heated it up, right? I took it out of the jar, poured it in and heated it up on the stove in a pot. And now I throw in matzah and mix it around. That's not going to be considered cooking the matzah?
That's cooking matzah, yes.
So why is that?
Because this large amount of liquid, we're talking about a liquid, it's very easy to define. It's when you pour it on the table, immediately spread out, or it's stuck on the table like a chunk that falls out.
So with the
Moshe
pasta
Feinstein
sauce,
defines ketchup as solid, not liquid. Moshe Feinstein defines ketchup as solid because when you pour it on the table, it stays together. It doesn't spread like water does or any liquid. It's like it's solid. So tomato sauce is definitely solid, even though it has some dampness or liquid in it. It's a definite solid. If you take tomato sauce with a tablespoon, it stays a chunk. It doesn't pour over anywhere.
I like hot ketchup when Moshe Feinstein, I can put it on the blech. I have no problem.
Correct.
Shabbos. It's
Correct.
like my chicken, my cold chicken.
Correct. That's what he says. He says it exactly on Bishul Chabishu. That's where he discusses ketchup. Of course, not directly because of Michzik Basha, but that's all that was the point. But on top of an upside down plate or something, right? You can cook your ketchup. If it was pre-cooked already, you can cook it again. Yes, it's called salad. It's a salad.
Maybe you saw that ketchup commercial where the guy can't get it. It's a salad.
It's a salad. Okay. Yes, David. Sorry, you're waiting for a while.
Not at all. Not at all. Years ago, you told us about the Mizono rolls, which don't work, also because of Tzurat HaPat. It has a Tzurat HaPat, if I'm not saying. So I'm wondering if you get a bagel or something you don't know if it's only been in oil, never baked, never, and they call it Mizono roll, but it has a Tzurat HaPat.
Right.
The Tzurat HaPat override everything.
So it doesn't. Very excellent question. David is asking. The regular, what's considered in the airplanes, you get Mizonos rolls, and in events, you get Mizonos rolls. Most poskim hold that those are a motzi, really, because they're baked. They're baked. The only reason that you may consider them Mizonos is because the fruit juice inside. Yeah. So, first of all, they're not as sweet as you would think that Mizonos should be. They're not that sweet. You barely taste the sweetness in them. But besides that is what David just said now, Tzurat HaPat. When the moment it acts like bread and it looks like bread, then guess what? It's bread. That's how the poskim define. Even though, according to the strict definition of the ingredients, it may be, it could have been mizonos, but it acts completely like bread and it looks like bread, so it's bread. It's a motzi.
So
that's what they say. Bracha will be a motzi, even for just one roll, and you would bench. For a kazait, you would bench.
On Pesach, you can buy stuff cake mix. It looks like cake mix. It's making cake, and it is cake.
So now, exactly. Now I'll define what. David now asks the following. So if we prepare real mizonos rolls, which are those that are fried or boiled and not baked. There are such rolls. I've seen them. They even have sandwiches. They make sandwiches out of them. They have tuna fish inside or egg inside, and it looks like a real roll, and it acts like a roll. It fills you up. Mamash, exactly the same definition we said before. It looks like bread, it acts like bread, so it should be bread. The answer is no, it isn't. Why? Because cooking, you cannot begin the considering a food as hamotzi if it was cooked. Cooking is a process that can never be a hamotzi. It doesn't matter the shape and the use or any of that sort. Proof to that, we know that if you eat enough cake, true cake, like a chocolate cake, if you eat enough cake to be considered kvi'at seudah, it's completely mizonos as a slice of cake. No question whatsoever according to all poskim. But if you eat quite a few slices of that cake, so it becomes hamotzi. You have to do wash, netilas yadayim with the bracha, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, and birkas hamazon at the end, just by eating cake. How much? Either 250 or 320 grams. It depends. Ashkenazic and Sephardic. Sephardic 250, Ashkenazic 320 gram of cake. That's a lot. It's a lot of cake. But if you eat all that, or rogalach, or anything of that sort, crackers, if you eat enough of that, it's considered motzi. and turn into a motzi just because of the amount. Nothing to do with the shape and the use of it. You're not using it like bread. You're just eating cake with your coffee. Nothing to do with bread, but it becomes a motzi. The logic is kviut suda. The fact that mizonos is mizonos, like one slice of cake, is mainly because it's eaten not as a meal, but between meals or as a dessert to a meal. The moment you decide to sit down and have your lunch as rogalach or crackers in large amount and you need that to fill you up as a whole lunch, then, and the fact that that's what we're going to say in a second, that it's baked, then it acts like bread. So it goes back to, it's not exactly toal pat that David mentioned before. It's never going to look like bread, and it really doesn't act like bread. You're not going to spread cheese and some olives on your piece of cake, but I hope not, unless you're sick or pregnant, then it may happen. But it's considered that you're using this cake as your lunch, as your kviut seudah, and it's baked with wheat, flour. It's the way bread is made, and it's acting like bread for you because it fills you up totally like a meal. That's the logic. But after having said all that, if you're going to have a type of mizonos that was cooked while made, you can have 500, 600 kilo of gram. Yerushalmi kugel is a good example. That's deep fried. That's why it's called cooked. But also take noodles, spaghetti, pasta. All those are cooked mizonos products. They're cooked, they're not baked. So you can have a whole bag of pasta, and it's still going to be only mizonos. 2 bags, a kilo. Yeah, better not to, but it doesn't matter how much you have of cooked mizonos, it's never going to turn into, even though it's your meal. You fill up on the pasta, you have spaghetti with sauce, you're full for the day. It doesn't matter. Cooked can never turn into a motzi. It's a definition prior to the looks of it or to the amount of it. That's why, going back to David's question, even if it has tsurat apat, if this roll looks like a bread roll, you can't tell the difference. If you look at it carefully, you'll see if it's deep fried. You can tell the difference between that and baked. But if no one tells you that, you may not even notice. So it looks like bread. It acts like bread because you're eating it as a sandwich with spreading stuff, schmear on it, and you're filling up on it. It's never going to be a motzi because it's cooked. The prerequisite of being a motzi has to be baked and not cooked. For all these cases. In all these cases.
My wife, she was trying out different rolls, buying different types of rolls. We buy one big challah.
One big challah, yeah, and a few rolls.
5 rolls.
Right.
So she was trying to buy different brands of rolls. So she bought new rolls. I brought new rolls.
Okay.
I looked at the package on Shabbos. So they're mazonas. They're like mazonas. I told her it was okay. Because we were Suda with it.
Right. And your shoe was baked. Your shoe was baked. It wasn't cooked. It wasn't fried. Deep fried. Looks like baked rolls. Right. So it's okay. You can use them as a motzi. No problem. Right. And they weren't very sweet. Right. When you tasted them, they looked just like bread and they tasted almost like bread. Right. Those are motzi. To most poskim. Yeah. Right. Uh-huh. Yes, David.
So I'm warning you, Rav Steinberg, next time you're in New York.
Yeah, hopefully never. Yeah.
Or for anyone, the real New York bagels in the old days. Exactly. But a real New York bagel is deep fried, and it's mamish used for tuna and lox and spread. So that's not hamotzi.
Correct. That's totally mizonos, no question whatsoever. No.
Wow. Zegadol.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Wow. People are used to it. People are used to making a motzi on that.
For sure.
Wow.
I believe.
Are you serious? Wow. Yeah, they're all surprised here also. All the men here in Beis Medrash are surprised. It should should be told to everyone. It's just something very important that people should know about. Wow. No matter how much you read of it, it remains, it's mizonos and alamichya in the end. Definitely. No question.
Boiled, after deep-boiled, baked, still baked.
Wait, that's something different. So again, David Weinstein is telling us that it's after it's boiled, it's baked.
Okay, he's right. I think nowadays.
Okay.
In the old, when I grew up in New York,
the difference in a bagel and a donut is exactly what you're saying.
No.
Differently. Yeah.
When I grew up in New York, and those who may remember, they used to put it the same way French fries were made. That's how a bagel was made. There was no baking in the old days. I think nowadays it's changed. For sure, the real New York bagel was never baked. For sure.
Wow. So those were
boiled. I'm not sure what the liquid was, but
boiled or deep fried, but it was definitely not baked afterwards. So then you're right, it's mizonos only. It could be, by the way, the difference between that and the donut is that there's no sugar. The moment you don't put sugar, you don't add sugar to it, then it's a bagel. Okay? It's more salty tasting than sweet tasting. That could be the difference. Even if it's made the same way, the taste could be different because of the sugar, the amount of sugar going in. Anyhow, then you're right. In the old time, or any store, that you have to really check every single shop where you buy your bagels. If it's still made that way, only deep fried or baked as well, then bracha changes accordingly. Okay, so bottom line with the matzah brai is when it's deep fried, no question, it's mizonos. When it's very shallow, just to drop just a little bit of oil, just to not so it shouldn't stick, then it's definitely a motzi. And when it's a middle amount, middle way, then and the pieces are broken to less than a kazait, which is usually the way we break them up, but much less than a kazait for matzah brai, then we're in trouble because then we don't know if to define it as still yet cooking because there is a nice amount there, or no, because it's not soaking in the it's not floating there or completely surrounded by the oil. So maybe still considered like shallow frying and not changing the bracha to mizonos. It remains a motzi. So in that situation, if that's the way you made the matzah brai, we should wash over real matzah, a piece of matzah, and then cover that to have the matzah brai as well. That's the solution.
So
in
my
that case.
wife asked me that. Not too much oil and break it into small pieces.
Right, and then it's mizonos. Right. No, sorry, not too much oil. It's a motzi. Sorry, then it's a definite motzi. Meaning it's a little amount of.
But I know it's
right, you know it's a motzi. You don't need to wash. Right, you don't need to wash over a different piece of meat. Matzah, that's your matzah. Right. Okay, so that was for that. A little bit. I went over time, which I thought to discuss this. And now let's go zoom straight into Leila Seder. Just a few halachos of Leila Seder, which come up as we're doing the Seder. Firstly, as we begin the Seder, we say the 15 simanim. Kadesh, Ruchatz, Kalpas, Yachatz. The custom to say all 15 of them all together. Everyone there in the Seder sings them together. The point of that is to show Leil HaSeder. Why is it called Leil HaSeder? The night of in order. The night in order. So this is exactly the reason, because everything is put in order. You know exactly what comes after what. Kadesh, Ruchatz, Kalpas, it's all in order. Obviously, you have to find out now why is that the order. And that's a little bit. That's already discussing the philosophical points of the Seder of the Seder, why it's structured that way. It could be very interesting. I'll just throw one example of a nice discussion that I've read a few years ago. Just the very beginning is Kadesh Uchatz, right? Seemingly, it's in the opposite order. If you want to do Leil HaSeder, put things in order, normally we hold like this. No, not from the point of view of washing, the point of view of, because we're not washing Uchatz for the bread yet. And anyway, every Shabbos or Yom Tov, we first do Kiddush, and then we watch for Hamotzi. So it should be the right order. We're talking about from the spiritual point of view. This rechatz is really just to make you pure, to purify your hands for the karpas that you're going to dip in salt water. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, when you used to dip a food in a liquid, you had to be pure, because otherwise your hands make the food impure if your hands are impure. So to remember the Beis Hamikdash, Zechel Hamikdash, we do it till today. Even though today we hold it with many times with the fork, not holding the actual karpas itself in our hands, we many times use it with the fork, and then we're anyway not touching it. So the whole idea is just Zechel Hamikdash. It's not real. And by the way, the whole night, we're supposed to try to feel as if we're present in Beit HaMikdash. Try to feel the holiness and the Shechina with us in every single home as if we're Beit Mikdash Me'at. Every single home is like a small Beit Mikdash. We do a lot of things during the night of Pesach to give us the feeling as if we're in Beis HaMikdash. So we have the tzli, although we don't eat it, but we have the roasted piece of meat, and to remind us we should be in Beis HaMikdash and feel as if we're there. Not only zechele, but to actually feel we're there. So according to that, why normally, if you check, for example, Mesilas Yesharim, that's the best book to see an order, sequence of spiritual development, right? The whole book of Mesilas Yesharim teaches us the proper order to develop spiritually, to climb the ladder, Mesilah. You have a ladder, you have a journey to take until you get to the peak of holiness. How does it work there? What are the steps? The order of the steps you take in Mesilas Yesharim. So at the very beginning, you speak about zehirut, zrizut, nekiyut, brishut, tahara. You first speak about correcting your ways, being careful on every single thing you do, purify yourself. After all those steps, the very last one, after Anava, Yirat Chet, many steps, the very last one is Kedusha. Kedusha is the very last. Kedusha is really, it's not even a step to take, it's the consequence, the result of all those steps you've gone, all your life, climbing and doing things better and perfecting and purifying. Oops, you get to Kedusha, you become holy. Kedusha is not something that you gain because of anything you do, meaning specifically for Kedusha. Because all you've done beforehand, Kedusha is really from Hashem connecting to you already. You're so prepared, you've prepared yourself so well to receive the divine holiness of Hashem that Hashem dwells within you. And you've actually become holy or holier than a person who isn't careful of his ways. There's nothing to work on the level of Kedusha. You've worked on yourself all the other levels. Now, it's a result. You become holy. Speaking of Chaim Kanievsky, that's exactly who he was. He was so careful of everything, every single thing he did, and he was engrossed and involved in Torah so much that he just became a holy person. He had Ruach HaKodesh. He was able to bless people and tell people what to do, and it came true. So Hashem was with him, but it's a result of preparing himself and going up step by step all his life. So according to that, why would Kadesh be first? I understand why Kiddush should come before the Suda. That's okay. But Rechatz, Karpas, Yachatz, Magid, all those should have been the steps before receiving Kedusha. The holiness should have been after Uchatz, for example. Uchatz is to purify ourselves. That's in the Mesilas Yesharim. Tahara comes way before Kedusha. So why Leila said it, that we switch around the order. And we're not even prepared for the meal yet. Like Kadesh, we're far from the meal. So you could have made Kiddush right before Hamotzi of the matzah. Instead of that, we begin the whole night with Kadesh, and though we hadn't taken those steps, those measures, those climbing the different levels until we reach Kedusha, reach the holiness. So the answer I've seen to this question is because on Leila Seder, we sort of, like we said before, imagining you're in Beis Hamikdash, Leila Seder, we leap into Kedusha. The night is so holy that we're automatically, we're in a holy level. We're on a holy level. Kadesh. That's the first thing. It's a holy night. The holiness comes out automatically. It's not due to a process. We're there. We're there with Hashem as if we entered Beit HaMikdash. If you enter Beit HaMikdash, then you're within a divine, holy location, tremendously holy location. So it affects you. You get the holiness into you. Of course, it depends how much work you've done before as to how much you absorb. We automatically absorb holiness no matter what. It just comes, it's bestowed upon you no matter what you've done beforehand. So that's this night. And it comes to show that really inside us, the internal, how can that happen that we leap into Kedusha without preparing? Because internally, our neshama is holy. No matter what we've done in our lives, neshama remains holy. And therefore, this night is a night of the neshama, is a night of the divine holiness that's within us, no matter what we did or didn't do during our life. That's why Kedusha comes first, and then all the other steps to gain that. But firstly, we're in it. We're inside. No matter what type of Jew we are, and who we are, and what we did and what we didn't do, doesn't matter. We're all this night within the holiness.
Like all who are hungry, all who are needy.
Right.
Like, you don't have to be on any particular level. All who are hungry.
Very nice.
Needy, come in and
right. Exactly. Right. You're saying even not just hungry physically, you're saying even spiritually. Right. They're not there at all, but even they are included this night. Very nice. Beautiful.
So how does that explain why it's the only one of the 12 simanim that has a vav in front of it is orchatz? So I could say, well, all the others are 2 syllables and you needed it to make it, for the song to work out. Okay. But leaving that aside, right? Yeah. It's Kadesh, almost like the two are linked. Kadesh orchatz. That's how you start the meal.
Right.
Then you can do karpas, yachatz, the other thing.
Right. Magin, matzah, motzi, matzah. Right. I don't know. It's a good question. Very good question. Actually, rechatz should have been linked to karpas because it's meant to purify our hands in order to be able to touch the dipped vegetable and remain pure. So you're right. It should have been rechatz vekarpas. The vav should have been between rechatz and karpas because they're linked together. Nakadesh rechatz. It may be that the Bala Agada is reminding us that true, this night we're holy no matter what. We're connected to our internal neshama. By the way, this is very, very relevant, very, it fits very well, it connects very well to the idea of this whole night. It was a night that Hashem created us as a nation. He took us out of Egypt. He redeemed us from Egypt. That night we became the holy nation, the chosen nation. That night that we became the Jewish people. So do we gain that by action, by deeds? No way. We had nothing to do with being chosen. Nothing to do with us. 80% of the Jews then died in Makat Choshech. That's to the minimal amount. Some say 1 out of 50, 1 out of 500 that came out of Egypt. It could have been much, much, much less than 20%. But the minimal amount of the entire Jewish people who were in Egypt, who were enslaved in Egypt, the minimum amount is 20% came out. But even they weren't righteous people, weren't extra special and following and everything. They were slaves. They had barely anything to do with Yiddishkeit. Ve'at arom ve'riyah, says Yechezkel. We mentioned it in the Agada. We mentioned this pasuk in the Agada. You're naked. What does that mean? We came out naked of mitzvos. We had no mitzvah. So Hashem gave us the Milah and the Korban Pesach in order to do something to gain the ability to come out of Egypt, do some mitzvah, follow something that Hashem tells you, so you're connected somewhere in some way. But really, it's the same leap as we do every single year over again that night ourselves. That's how the Jews were taken into holiness, taken into becoming the chosen nation without steps of doing things on their own. Then it's necessary. Now the Vav could be that the Baal Agada is telling us it's very nice that Hashem loves us and takes us under his wings and wishes for us to be his holy nation. But don't forget, you need to work on it. It's true for that night that we gain the holiness just from the mere fact that we're Jewish. We're part of the Jewish people. But then ulchatz, don't forget, it doesn't stay forever, this type of fond relationship that Hashem has to us. He's full of love to us, but he wants us to work as well.
Gift, but.
Right, exactly. It's a gift, but you need to work for it to really gain it. So maybe that's the Vav. Okay. So we begin with those 15 simanim, and then we go to Kadesh, where it's customary, though there are families that don't do it this way, but customary, same as, and that's how Shlomo Zalman says as well, same as all year round, the Kiddush is made by one person, the Baal Habayit, whatever it may be. So same for Leila Seder. One person should say the Kiddush out loud and everyone listen. Just one difference between this Kiddush and all the rest of the year. All the rest of the year, we're Yotzei by Shomea Keone. We listen, and we're Yotzei by that person saying it out loud. And then we don't even need to drink from the cup of wine. It's customary, and it's mitzvah min muvchar, says the Shulchan Aruch, to drink a little bit of it. But it's not really necessary, because the person making Kiddush drinks from the wine, and then the Kiddush was made over wine, and we listen to Kiddush, and we're fine, we're Yotzei. It's good enough. Better yet, if everyone tastes a little bit of wine, it doesn't have to be a large amount, doesn't have to be revit or anything. The person drinking from it has to drink at least milolog mav, if not, better yet, revit. But the people listening can just have a sip in the cup, and that's enough. Leila Seder, it's not true. Because Leila Seder, besides it being Kiddush, which would mean the same as all the rest of the year, it's also one of the 4 kosas. There's an obligation, the personal obligation for each and every one of us to drink 4 cups. And the first one is Kiddush. So there, we need 2 things. A is to actually drink at least a revit of the cup. And if you have a larger cup than revit, which is, as we said many times, 81 cc, which is a half of a disposable average regular plastic cup, half of that's revit. So if your becher, if your wine glass has that amount, then you're Yotzei. If you have more than that, because we should pour the wine or grape juice to the top of the wine glass we're using, no matter what the size is. If it's a big one or a small one, you have to fill it to the top. That's to respect the mitzvah. So you fill it to the top. On Pesach, specifically for Arba Kosos, we have an obligation that we need to drink a rov kos. We need to drink most of the cup, no matter how large or small the cup is. It has to be rov kos. Minimal of a revit, that rov kos has to be minimal revit. If we have an exact revit, we should drink the whole cup. Not even milolog mav. On Pesach, for the Arba Kosos, best to do revit, but diavad yotzi milolog mav, which is a little more than half of revit. It's like 45 cc when revit is 81. So if you drink 45, b'diavad yotzi, much better to drink a full revi'it, which isn't much. But if you have a cup larger than that, you need to drink the majority of the cup, no matter how much that is. So it's best if you buy, or if you if you use a wine glass that's approximately revi'it, because you don't want to fill yourself up or drink so much wine or grapes through the night. So you make sure to have the not minimal revi'it amount, a little bit more than minimal. So you don't want to have less than what you're supposed to have truthfully, but not too much more than that, to drink the rov cost.
So you're saying revi'it is 81 cc?
Correct. Which is half a disposable cup. That's how you measure it. You pour in the disposable cup halfway, not from, it has to be half full, because the cups are sometimes narrow on the bottom and wider on the top. So it has to go a little bit more than half, because it has to fill half of the volume of the cup. Oh, yeah? Uh-huh. Okay. Familiar. Thank you.
It's a quarter of what? What is the measure?
Log. Revi'it a log. There's a measurement called log, and that's a quarter of a log, right? And now there's an extra special custom, mitzvah mubchar and Pesach only again, is to try to finish the whole cup. So he said like this: the minimal proper amount is revi'it. B'diavad, if you can't help it, or if you didn't have enough wine or stuck with for some reason, then even melolog mavir yotz. But best l'chatchila is revi'it. On top of that, you need to, in any case, drink majority of the cup of the wine you have of the amount you have in your cup. And on top of that, mitzvah in a mubchar, it's like mamash, top. On Pesach only, is try to finish the whole cup. Each one of the 4 cups, try to finish the whole cup. That shows most respect, covered to the mitzvah, to Hashem. You finish up the whole cup, because it's a cup of special mitzvah. You want to show that you like this mitzvah so much, you drank it all up. It's so important to you that you drank it all. So those are the levels of trying to fulfill the mitzvah properly. And then when we say during Kiddush, we say Shechianu as one of the brachos. This year will include Shabbos, so you have to remember to add the additions within the Kiddush of Shabbos. The additions in brackets. Within the Kiddush, you look at the Haggadah, you'll see on Shabbos, you add a few words, Mekadesh Shabbat v'Yisrael v'Azmanim, at the very end. And then you say Shechianu. The Shechianu you have to have in mind, and this you should try to declare before Kiddush, announce it to the people around the table, that as we hear the Shechianu, the person, again, one person making Kiddush will be the one saying Shechianu, all the rest of us listening. But we should all have in mind, and him too, that the Shechianu includes the day, first of all, Shechianu v'kimanu v'giyanu lezman hazeh, the fact that we are fortunate to reach again Pesach. And besides that, to include all the mitzvos that we will be carrying out this night, which are tons of mitzvos. I think the Gra counted 64 mitzvos that night. 64 that night. They're right that there are banan, customs, minhagim, everything. All types, 64. You have to be the Gra to really make out so many, but definitely the many, many mitzvos that night. And by the way, that's why the Navi speaks about, I think Zechariah, Laila keyom Yair. There's a pasuk in one of the Nevi'im, Laila keyom Yair. There's one night the entire year that is lit up like daytime. And he meant this night of Leila Seder. Every night over again. Why is that like day? Not only because we were redeemed and it was the happiest night in the year, in the entire year for the Jewish people, and it returns to be so every single year. As we know from Hasidic work, that every year the same divine presence and action and entity and being that was back then, historically in the past, that some event happened, it reoccurs every year. not just for remembering Zechel Yetzias Mitzrayim, to remember it happened then. Right now, Tet Vav Nisan, Leilat Vav Nisan, every single year, Hashem does the same thing with us over and over again. He takes us, he frees us every single year. We're freed from the confinement of the Yetzer Hara. That's how you get rid of all our chametz. El Shabayisai resembles the Yetzer Hara, resembles the Satan. We get rid of all that. And we're redeemed every single year by Hashem helping us come out of our confinement, of our imprisonment of during the year. Anyway, so it's like day, but not only because of that, not only because of redeeming us and the holiness of the divine holiness, but also because of this tremendous amount of mitzvahs. There's no other night, barely are there any mitzvot that are meant to be carried out at night. Majority of the mitzvahs we have are daytime mitzvahs. Majority. Here in Kriyat Shema, that there is a mitzvah at night, there's also one during the day. There's barely any mitzvah you have to carry out during the night, except for this night of Leil Seder. It's filled with mitzvahs that have to be necessarily at night and not during the day. That's why Laila Ke'or Keyom Ya'ir. This night is like daytime. It's like it has to do, depends what it has to do one with the other, because it's a night of redeeming us and the holiness of Hashem so close to us. That's why it has so many mitzvahs. It has to do one with the other.
Purim's mitzvahs are at night. Purim mitzvahs in the morning.
Not really. The Megillah, Mishloach Manos, Matalas Levyonim, and Seudah all have to be carried out during the day. Only the Regina reading at night, the only thing is to read the Megillah at night, which is only an addition to the actual mitzvah of Megillah reading. The actual mitzvah was during the day. Yeah, people aren't aware that Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Rabbi Shua ben Levi added the fact that you have to read the Megillah at night. It's Derabanan, whereas the Megillah during the day is Divrei Kabbalah. It's from the Ktuvim. It's from Megillah Esther. It's an obligation. It's much higher than the nighttime one, even though it looks like it seems the opposite. We make a whole fuss out of the Megillah reading at night, and we zoom through it, speed through it during the day. But it's the opposite. The more important Megillah reading is in the daytime. The night is only addition. There's barely anything that has to be carried out specifically at night. Okay, so the Shechianu will include all that we'll be doing during that night. The actual Arba Kosos. So, best if you can take in wine for Arba Kosos. That's the best. There's a nice vort, a nice idea behind it that Shlomo Zalman figured out. He says, why is it specifically best to carry it out with wine? Because we know that it's the four kosos resemble, one of the reasons we have four, resembling the Arba Leshonot Shel Geula. Hotzeiti, V'itzalti, V'ga'alti, V'lakachti. We're just missing the fifth is Ve'eveiti. There's a whole discussion on the fifth kos, if you're supposed to have it or not. It's a whole discussion. But definitely the four. Yeah, Bazman Hazeh. These days that we're back in Israel, and the Rav Goren spoke about it, the Rav Kasher spoke about it. The manual elaborated over the fifth cup, whether they should be having it or not. Most of us don't have a fifth cup, enough to cope with four. To have to drink another one would be simple. When would you have it? Yeah, I guess at the very end. I don't know exactly with which saying, but it would be another fifth cup. Most of us don't have it. We put a cup of Eliyahu Navi on the table. We fill it up. Some say that's the Kos Chamishi. It resembles the Ve'eveiti. Ve'eiti is called Eliyahu Navi. Eliyahu Navi is the one. Ve'eshira avot b'nei ve'lo b'nei malavotam. Hinei anochi yishalachem et Eliyahu Navi lifnei bayom Hashem hagadol ve'hanora. Eliyahu will be the one to declare and announce the Mashiach is about to come in 3 days. So the fifth cup, the Ve'eiti, is resembled by the kosher Eliyahu, which we fill up and we leave on the table before Shfoch Chamatcha. We fill up the fifth cup. By the way, that cup, you should try to cover with something for overnight. Don't leave it exposed overnight, even in the fridge. You should cover with something. Or you can put it in a jar. Cover the jar and use that for Kiddush the following morning. It's a very nice custom. Use that for Kiddush all morning. Even though you haven't sit from it unless you tell the kids that Eliyahu Navi is sipping from it right now. But you move the table a bit and they see the wine moving. Wow, he's sipping. Yeah, well, for that for his kids. Now grandkids who do that. But truthfully, no one sipped from the cup, so you can actually return it back to the bottle. There's no problem to go back to the bottle as is. It's not yayin pagum. Otherwise, you have to fill the cup with a little bit of wine and then pour it back into the bottle. So you just pour it back in the bottle. But it's nicer if you keep exactly that wine instead of pouring it back, keep it for tomorrow morning, for the next morning, following morning, and make kiddush on that for Yom Tov morning. Anyhow, so why is it best to have wine? Because are developments within the Geulah. Each one resembles another stage, another phase of the Geulah happening, occurring. We're not going to go through each and every one of them, but you'll see in Rashi there and other commentaries how they explain the elevation of the Geulah going through these four parts of the process. So it says of Shlomo Zalman, the only drink or food for that same matter of fact, that you feel elevation as you're drinking more of it is wine. Because you become more and more happier and happier, and drinking wine on a high as you're drinking more and more. Whereas if you're just drinking 4 cups of grape juice or 4 cups of orange juice or 4 cups of water, you don't feel any elevation. If already the opposite, you feel heavier and heavier, and you can't take it anymore. Whereas by wine, you feel more delightful with each and every cup. Those who know how to drink and those who can take it, tolerate it, then they're feeling happier and happier. So it's exactly it's going up and up. It's not straight line, same situation all the time. So that's a nice way to explain why Dafka wine. But even though Moshe Feinstein was very, very stringent on this point, he said only wine, even if you have headaches afterwards and you feel miserable afterwards, you have to drink wine. Moshe Feinstein was very, very stringent on that. He proves it from Rabbi Yehuda bar Bilai, when the Gemara tells us the story that he used to drink 4 cups of wine, and his head hurt him till Shavuos. He had a headache till Shavuos. 49 days of a headache because of the wine he drank, but anyhow, he did so every year. So he says that's from Moshe Feinstein. He says just one thing. If you dislike the moment you're drinking, you hate the wine, then don't do it. That's the only way you can get out of drinking wine. But if you're enjoying the drink right now, as you're sipping it down, you're enjoying it, but you know it's going to affect you badly afterwards, that's not a good enough excuse to get off of the obligation to drink wine. Still drink wine. Shlomo Zalman, on the other hand, disagreed, and he said it's the exact same to drink grape juice as it is to drink wine, except for this vort. It's a vort that is like to show that we're climbing up different stages of the Geulah. So drinking wine gives you that feeling that you're progressing and growing with your happiness and drinking more cups. So what he did personally, he mixed the two. He had, let's say, majority or halfway grape juice and part of it partially also wine. You mix the two together so you don't get heavy-headed too much or lightheaded by the wine. So you drink a little bit of wine, then you gain the fact that it makes you happier and happier, but yet you're not drunk at the end of the evening, lightheaded, and you're falling asleep or not feeling normal. So you could do that. You could try having like the first cup only wine and then start mixing as you go on with the next two or three cups of wine. You start mixing. Whichever way you can take it. Oh, yeah? Even the Chazon Ish is great. Okay. So it's definitely, Moshe Feinstein turned out very stringent at this point. Those poskim disagreed. Okay. Now, the fact that we said before that this Kiddush is different than all year round, from the point of view that it's one of the 4 kosos, so each one of us should have our own cup with the amount of the measurement you're supposed to drink and drink it up. That's one point that's different than all the other all year round of making Kiddush. The other point is that each one of us is supposed to lift up the cup as we're hearing the Kiddush. Because again, we're not just listening to one person's kiddush over that person's cup, and being yotzei the fact that kiddush was made. That's not enough during Pesach, for the first night of Pesach. In this night, we are meant to have our own cup as one of the four kosos, make kiddush over it. So to make kiddush, actually, we don't need, because it's shomea keone, but it should be over our cup, not over his cup. Each and every one of us has our cup, our own cup, to make kiddush. So we're listening to him, but we're raising our cup, that same as he does, same as the person making kiddush has to raise their cup. It has to be a tefach above the table, which is 8 centimeters above the table. If you have, so Shlomo Zalman wrote that if you have a stem to the cup, like those kiddush cups that have like a stem, and then they have the cup itself, so that's included. You need to have the 8 centimeters from the wine downwards, not from the actual bottom of the cup. If the shape of the cup is a large stem, it's all counted within the 8 centimeters to lift above the table. So sometimes if you have a long stem, you just lift a drop, and then your wine is above
when you make kiddush, if it's not lifted up, you're not doing it right.
Correct.
Normal.
You can't leave it on the table and say you can't make kiddush. You have to lift it up, depending how your cup is made. That's how high you have to lift it up. If it's just a cup without a stem, you lift it up 8 centimeters on the table.
This is a regular Shabbos at din?
Yes, regular Shabbos.
Oh, regular.
Yes, yeah, regular Shabbos. Yeah. For the person who's making kiddush, he's supposed to lift it up 1 tefach from the table, and the wine above 8 centimeters from the table. But during Pesach, the difference is that we all need to do that. Pesach, we all need to do that, men and women alike, because most of the mitzvahs of the Seder are relevant to men and women alike. Because of af hen ayuba to anes, some of them they're obligated to write level, like matzah. Matzah, they're obligated to write level, even though it's a mitzvah eseh shazman grama, it's only that night. The mitzvah eseh that has time restricted, only that night, and maybe only till chatzos of that night, depending if you hold like Rabbi Zalman or Rabbi Akiva goes all the way down to dawn, but it's definitely one night during the entire year. So it's time restricted, time bound mitzvah, which should be exempt from women. But the answer is because they are, it says, Lo tochal alav chametz, shivat yom tochal matzot. There's a comparison between chametz and matzah. The pasuk, one pasuk discusses both. So same as they are obligated not to have chametz, that's a lot. That's a negative commandment, which definitely all women are obligated equally as men. So they're also obligated from this hekesh, from the fact that they're both on the same pasuk, they're also obligated to a right level to eat matzah. They must eat the kazait, whatever amount we'll soon get to, hopefully, of how we eat the matzah. But all the other mitzvahs of that night, well, Kiddush also. Kiddush are also obligated to raita, because that's Shamo v'Zachor. Since in one luch of the luchos, one time it says Zachor et Yom HaShabbat, and the other luchos it says Shamo et Yom HaShabbat. Shamo is the negative commandments, and Zachor the positive. So we compare the two again. It's similar to the Chametz and Matzah idea, that we compare Kiddush to the negative commandments of Malachos. Obviously, women are not allowed to do Malacha on Shabbos, so they also are obligated to do Kiddush. So all this is the right, but majority of the mitzvahs of Leila Seder, like the Maro, like the Arbakosos, Karpas, Charosis, all the mitzvahs of Leila Seder, they are time-bound mitzvahs, positive mitzvahs, and they don't have this type of link between the negative and the positive. So their women should be exempt from them because it's mitzvahs of Rama. But the answer is, since they were part of the miracle as well, they came out of Egypt same as men did. We all came out as a nation. Some even say that the miracle was done by women. Why? Because it says, Bizchut nashim tzadkaniyot shebato adon nigalu. We came out of Egypt due to our wives. They were the righteous ones. We weren't. They were the ones. They made us have children, and all those stories about while they were enslaved, they still had the hope, and they still created more and more children, to have the nation grow and grow. They were the righteous ones. They held strong in Egypt. So because of them, due to them, we were redeemed. So definitely women should be part of the mitzvahs of that night, but it's slightly different level. Although men is, for most of those mitzvahs of the Seder night, they're also only rabbinic, except for Maror, which is the right to not in our days. Because nowadays we don't eat the Pesach, and the Maror is only the right when you eat the Pesach. So nowadays even Maror is the Rabbanan. Most of the mitzvahs are the Rabbanan, so men and women are equal at the same level. They're the Rabbanan, we're the Rabbanan. So they too should be lifting up their cup, and while making Kiddush, they're also obligated Arba Kosos, the 4 cups. They can definitely have grape juice if it's best for them. They can definitely have grape juice, no question. The only thing that's different between men and women the entire Seder night, and only for Ashkenazic women, not the Sephardic women, is Haseva. We do all the eating and drinking of the night by Haseva, by leaning to our left. Not all eating and drinking, it's the eating and drinking of the mitzvah part of the Seder, the 4 kosos and the matzah. That's it. The Maror we don't lean. The korach we do because it includes matzah. The afikomen we do because it's matzah. All the rest not. The karpas we don't need to lean. The Maror we don't need to lean. The Haggadah we mustn't lean. Saying the Haggadah we mustn't lean. Saying the Haggadah you sit straight forward. You say it seriously. It's learning Torah. Who learns Torah like this? It's not. Yeah, straighten up. Learn Torah, to do it to respect the Torah. You sit respectfully. And the brachos, all the brachos you say before even the parts that we're supposed to lean for. Let's say the amotzi lechem and achilas matzah and bor pregafin and all the brachos we're saying during Leila Seder, we have to sit straight up, not leaning. You don't go like this. You say Baruch Atah pregafin and drink. You sit up straight, say Baruch Atah seriously with all your intent, all your kavanah, with full respect, and then you lean as you're drinking. And by the way, mentioning so or I forget, women, Ashkenazic women don't lean for the entire Seder. They eat the matzah and they drink the wine without lean. Ashkenazic women, Sephardic women lean as well. No, it's not sneeze issue. It's complicated to explain this. So I won't go into it right now. It's a very complicated. That what? Ramah says it. The Ramah. Ramah. Reish Mem Aleph. The Ramah. No. The Ramah. The one that the Ashkenazim follow. It says women don't lean. It has to do with the whole halachic complicated discussion there that we won't go into now. I guess if they want to, they can. It's not a sneeze issue at all. It's also now related to Isha Mishobedet LeBa'ala. There's a whole issue. If let's say you're eating by your rabbi, so you don't lean. We all don't, even men. We don't do a seva if we're eating by a rabbi. Why? Because you can't feel liberty if you're by a rabbi. But to show respect, you can't sit like this in front of your rabbi.
That's Rabbi Mufak.
Yeah.
Most people don't have Rabbi Mufak.
That's true. And not only that, he can give you permission, and then he can lean. So most rabbis would give you permission to lean because they want you to fulfill a mitzvah. Although Shlomo Zalman says something very cute. He says, don't ask for permission. Because what are you doing by asking for permission? It's sort of forcing him to act disrespectfully in front of him. You're almost saying to him, because what's the whole reason we shouldn't lean in front of a rabbi? Because it's disrespectful. You're almost saying, Rabbi, can I act disrespectfully in front of you? Is that okay? Yeah, are you right? Are you letting away your covenant for me? So if he agrees, if he tells you that, then you can lean. If he doesn't, don't lean. That's the halacha. You're not doing anything against halacha.
Yeah, but you don't have to ask your father, right?
Right, because that's not the same. You don't have the same. No, you don't have the same type of. Halachically, you may be right. Same as you're supposed to also respect your rabbi, or even more. No, not more. The Gemara says that Avedas Rabbo and Avedas Avi, Avedas Rabbo Kodem. You return your you turn your lost and found object, to the rabbi that taught you most of your Torah, right? So because he brought you to Olam Haba, he's bringing you to Olam Haba, and your father just brought you to Olam Hazeh. That's why he's more supposed to respect him more than your father. But a father doesn't have that same type of official feeling. Like in front of your parents, you don't act so officially like in front of a rabbi. We're supposed to show respect, definitely, but it wouldn't be disrespectful if we recline in front of a father as it would be in front of a rabbi. That's why it's not the same. And we take it for granted that he's mochel. A father is mochel. Like most of us, when our father comes in, we don't get up from our chair, whereas when a rabbi comes in, we do. Because we take for granted that our parents are mochel. We should be like lifting up a little bit, getting up a little bit, to show respect. We don't do that because we assume that they don't need it, they don't require it from us. Same for leaning, but by a rabbi, we should not be. So some, in the old days, it was, the reason women wouldn't recline was because they were fearful in front of their husbands, same as we in front of a rabbi. They were fearful. They didn't feel leisure, like they didn't have a leisure feeling like you should while reclining. They didn't have that in front of their husbands. But then we switched, the women switched into becoming Nashim Chashuvot. And that's what the Shulchan Aruch says. They can do reclining as much as they'd like, meaning they're equal to their husbands. There's no one that feels intimidated by their husband. Hopefully, that's not the type of relationship we have between husband and wife, and therefore they're obligated. The Ramah, even though says, not because the Ashkenazic women are not Hashuvot, don't take it that way, that they're still Meshua to their husbands. It's not true. But there's a different reason, which I won't get into now. The Rav Yah, that says that no one should be reclining nowadays because it's uncomfortable. We do it only for women, not for men. We'll go into it right now. But one point that is related to all of us related to the fact that women don't recline at all during the night, and that is, for men, should we recline during Shulchan Orech? We said before, all the eating elements of the Seder, we should be reclining. Does that include Shulchan Orech, our meal, the meal itself? We're eating the fish and the soup and the chicken and the kugel and salads. As we're eating the meal, should we be reclining or not? The Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch both say that kol ameisev b'chol hasuda is a mishubach. The more you recline, the better, because you're showing the free. You're a free man. It's a night of freedom. It's a night that you recline like a rich person, like a person that has all he needs and is not conflicted by anything, and he feels very leisurely. So we should have done it during the meal as well. But says Shlomo Zalman that we don't need to, and better if we don't. Why? Not because halachically it's wrong, but because it's severely and deeply uncomfortable. If we say the truth, it's not comfortable to recline as we eat. And no matter how much Chazal described it as being a comfortable and leisurely way of eating, we feel uncomfortable because we're not used to it. In those days, they used to recline all year round while they were eating. That's how they used to eat. They had a very low table. They had these couches, and they used to eat this way. So for them, a slave wouldn't eat that way during the year. So we're showing this night, no one's like a slave. No one's like a helper that would eat straight or even standing. This night, we're all free people. We're all balabatim. We're all on our own. So we recline because that's the more comfortable way to do things. But today, it's not true. It's very uncomfortable. It says in Shlomo Zalman, where you need to, do it, of course. When you don't need to, don't do it, because why feel uncomfortable in the entire meal? It's supposed to feel as comfortable as possible. If for some reason someone feels very comfortable, so it's fine. Let him recline. Not sure how his shirt will look afterwards, but you'll see all of the eight, the whole menu on his shirt. But Or in a kittel, it'd be worse. Those who wear a kittel, nice white kittel, so it's not comfortable. By the way, reclining for abakosos is very tricky because the cup is filled with wine or grape juice, and you're tilting over, it pours over your Hitler shirt. So this I heard from Phil Malka years ago already. I assume it's true according to all poskim. He says, immediately after Seber Pragafen, you can take a sip, the first sip of wine you can take as you're sitting, straight up, before you recline. Then you make it a little less full. It's supposed to be filled to the top because of respect to the bracha. And we say you're supposed to drink at least rov kos, majority of the cup, or even better, the whole cup. But you don't have to recline the first second as you're sipping the first few sips of the cup. Sip firstly as you're sitting straight, then it becomes less full. And then as you recline, it's easier to gulp it down without spilling it over any. That's another trick we can use. What's that? Exactly. It's very practical, right? Very practical, very necessary, and important to know that it's okay. People may think it's not okay. How can I drink even the first sip with that? Because by the way, if you don't recline matzah, for example, you're not yotze. Some say you're not yotze the matzah. Some say you're not yotze the haseva. In any case, you have to repeat. You have to repeat over again eating the matzah. The 4 kosas, it depends which one. It depends if we're allowed to drink between the kosas. So some we have to drink over again, some we don't. But it's very important to recline. Otherwise, you're not doing the mitzvah enough of filling it properly. So you would think maybe you can't even sip before you recline. So the answer is no. Sipping in the beginning is okay as long as you have the majority of the cup reclining. Okay.
Regarding a kittel.
Yes.
If you used to conduct your own seder and you wear a kittel, now you're going to someone else's house where you're not conducting the seder. Should you still wear your kittel?
Of course. Nothing to do with conducting. It's our custom. Some people's custom is to wear a kittel during Leila Seder. Nothing to do with conducting. It's a personal custom. If your father, grandfather did it, so you continue on. Yeah. Another very important, very interesting case, very interesting halachic discussion here is the question: how come we have such a long interruption between two things? Actually, one is the seuda after having made kiddush. Normally, every Shabbos and Chag, we can't just make kiddush and read the newspaper or learn or schmooze for half an hour, and then go watch. We can't do that. We have to have en kiddush ela bimkom seuda. That means not only location-wise, the kiddush has to be together with the seuda, but also time-wise. En kiddush ela bimkom seuda, they have to be connected. So a few minutes, fine. They say maximum up to half an hour between kiddush and washing. Maximum. Should be much, much sooner. Here, we're talking about kiddush, then a drop of karpas, less than the kazait of some vegetable, and then 2 hours later, or however long it takes to finish the agada, we go wash matzah. Where's the kiddush in Kom Seudah? And even, I don't know if more problematic than that, but as also problematic as well is another point. We know normally that when you drink, let's say, a revis of water or juice or wine or anything, there is a time boundary of how long can you wait till you say bracha achrona over the drink you just had. And to say broi nefashos, ala gefen pre gefen, depending on which drink you had, maximum half an hour. You go by till you have to say the bracha achrona. It's not like a full meal where you get 72 minutes. Here it's just a revis of drink. It takes maximum half an hour for it to digest, and that's it. You can't say bracha achrona. Here, again, we drank the revis of wine. We ate a little bit of karpas, which extends the time a little bit further. But from that point on till matzah, we're not going to eat a thing. So where's the bracha achrona over the wine? These are tremendous questions that luckily are very difficult to solve. So on the first question, Shlomo Zalman answers the following. Why is it considered Kedushin Kom Seudah, even though you're eating the Seudah much, much later? The answer is when do we do yachatz? What is yachatz? When you break the middle matzah in two, and you put the larger, you return the largest part of the two parts. The larger one, you return back within the other two matzahs, and the smaller part, sorry. You put the smaller part back into the matzah, and the larger part is sefer afikomen. Okay, the two parts. So, when do we do that yachatz? At the very beginning. Kadesh, uchatz, karpas, yachatz. And then magid. Magid, rachza, matzi, matzah. Why do we do yachatz at the very beginning? Why do we do yachatz all together? What's the point of yachatz? Why break the middle matzah in two? The answer is, we want to show that it's lechem oni. The matzah is a bread of the poor people. That's why that's what the Torah defines, lechem oni. The bread of the poor means not only is it this thin, stiff, hard piece of bread that looks stale and old, and it's expensive, right? You can't afford to buy it, but but it's like poor people who don't have the opportunity to eat delicious bread. So besides being itself a type of food for the poor, it also we break it in half to show that all we've got is half a matzah. We don't even have a whole matzah. That's lechem oni. We're like poor people who don't have a whole matzah. Let alone the fact that we have two other whole ones besides the half, which makes it even more than every other Shabbos and Chag. That's besides the point. It's a big problem. That's why the Gra holds, by the way. And I think not only the Gra, but it's mainly the Gra. I believe even the Rambam holds this way. Not mistaken. I'm back in my mind, I remember the Rambam, but at least the Gra holds this way. You're supposed to have only two matzahs on Leila Seder, not three. You're only supposed to put two matzahs on the table. And when you break the bottom matzah, then it's really lechem oni, because you're going to make a motzi, a lechem mishneh of a matzah and a half. That's never done all year round. And that's real oni. That really shows you're like a poor person.
That's probably the rationale for the priest that we make a motzi.
Exactly. That's the rationale for three, that you do have lechem mishneh. But then, how is that proving that we're like poor people? We're having more than usual instead of less. 2.5 instead of 2. So it's no problematic from that point of view. The answer to that, by the way, would be, this is important already, speeding forward to a motzi matzah, doing the matzah properly. And that's the main mitzvah of the night, is the matzah. After all, with all the 64 mitzvahs and minhagim and the rabbanan, the matzah is the most important one of that night, of the entire 7 days of Pesach. So the proper way to deal with the mitzvah of matzah is when you say a motzi lechem min haaretz, you hold on to all three of them. You lift up all three as you say a motzi lechem min haaretz. By the way, it's best if at least all men around the table have their own three matzah, not to rely on one person making a motzi for all and distributing a piece of matzah for all. It's much better if at least each man around the table has his own three, and from that he helps you distribute as you conducting the seder. He does also distribute to some people around him. So therefore, this way everyone can get their piece of matzah. We'll soon learn how much each one is supposed to get from the matzah.
The saltish. Every Shabbos, you have salt.
Right. Pesach not.
Right.
Why? Why? Because we're supposed to have matzah bilvad, matzah only. Anything you add to the taste of it. So because of that, there's a custom, even though not all hold this way, to have the salt on the table, not to actually salt your matzah, but have it on the table. That's al korban melach. Actually, I'm thinking of it now. We all have that, no matter what. The salt water. Exactly. So we don't even need to have the salt shaker there. We have the salt water on the table. So that definitely covers for the fact that it should be salted, but we don't salt the matzah at all. We can't spread anything on the matzah, like no honey or anything of that sort, because it's supposed to be just the taste of matzah. Tochlu matzot. You have to eat matzah. Nothing to spread on it, nothing to add to its taste. So again, the way we do it is we lift up all three before we say Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz. After we say Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz, we drop the lowest matzah. We drop it because we're holding all three in order to have Lechem Mishnah, like Harley just said, to have the two whole ones in our hands as we say Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz. That's our Lechem Mishnah. Then we drop the lower one, and then we're holding on only to the whole upper matzah and the half or split or broken middle matzah. We're holding on to only 1.5, and on that we say, the second bracha, we only say over that. So that answers the question. The lechem oni is really when we're saying ala chilat matzah. That's what we're referring to the mitzvah of achilas matzah. And now we only have 1.5 in our hand, so it's back to being lechem oni. That's how we take care of lechem mishnah on one hand, lechem oni on the other. How do we actually eat from the matzah? So Shlomo Zalman says this point he couldn't find clearly in any book, and he says it's amazing, and he said he's sad to see that the most important component of Leila Seder, the most mitzvah that we wait for all year round, to eat that kazait matzah or much you need to eat on Leila Seder, it wasn't passed down generation to generation how to fulfill the mitzvah properly. What's the issue? From which matzah should you be eating out of kazait? Definitely not the one he dropped, because that's definitely out of the question, because he only held the matzah and a half, as we were saying, achilas matzah. But now you can choose to eat the kazait of the higher matzah, of the highest one, or the whole one, or the broken one. Now, besides that, we have family members, our wives, our children, who don't have their own matzah. Where do they take from? How much do they eat from our matzah? So he says that finally what he decided the best way to do it is the following. And I don't think people know this, and not so many people do it this way, but it's important to learn how to do it properly. It says like this. After you've dropped the lowest matzah and you say achilas matzah, now you do the following. You break the upper matzah, the highest one, the whole one, you break quickly into small pieces, and that's served, you don't have to actually give it to each and every family member, you put them on a plate and they distribute the plate around, it goes around the family members, and each one takes a piece of that higher matzah. What's that meant? What is that meant for? That's meant for each one to have lechem mishnah. Because if they didn't have the three matzahs in front of them, they're dependent on your lechem mishnah, like we do every Shabbos in Yom Tov. We give them a piece of the challah. So they're supposed to receive a piece of the matzah, and the top matzah is the one that's most probably considered the lechem mishnah type, the lechem mishnah part, and not the lechem oni type. The broken one is the lechem oni, even though it's not so sure which one is the lechem oni we're supposed to eat from kazait, but that's most probably the one. So you give them from the upper one, break it quickly into small pieces, and it gets distributed. And then the person who made the bracha itself, who had the three matzahs in front of him, he then needs to eat the following. He needs to first have kazai. Well, it doesn't matter the order. Doesn't matter the order.
You shouldn't be talking till you eat that full kazai.
No, that's definitely. But what do you eat it from? The kazai definitely should be mainly from the broken one, because that's the lechem oni one. So your kazait of the person who conducts the seder and has those firots in front of him, his main mitzvah of achilas matzah should be from the broken one, the full kazait. Besides that, of course. If you have hand matzah, it's big. It's very, very big. It's like those round hand ones. You definitely have a kazait left. If you have machine matzah, then you're right. You have to be careful that. 2/3 of the sheet of machine. Right, 2/3, and then actually you left for afikomen a very small piece, like 1/3 of the matzah only for afikomen, which is not a kazait. So you have to supplement for it by eating more matzah besides what you left over for afikomen. But most of us have hand shmura matzah, which is much larger, and then you have kazait for afikomen and kazait for the lechem oni. Anyhow, so it's here to finish. It's very getting late. Try to finish up this point. But besides having the kazait of the middle matzah of the lechem oni, Besides that, you're supposed to have lechem mishneh. Now, we hold normally that we have a kazait from lechem mishneh. That's how we eat every Shabbos. One kazait with lechem mishneh. Says Shlomo Zalman, so you would need. Normally, it would be enough even to have one piece like you gave distributed to all the other people around. You distributed a small piece. Have that one piece of the upper matzah, of the highest matzah, the whole one. Have one piece of that as well to be yotze the lechem mishneh, because he had a kazait from the lechem mishneh, which was the matzah and a half. You had a kazait from the half. But since the poskim are not sure which one of the matzahs is the lechem only one, is the one who's supposed to have the kazait of mitzvahs matzah, not the lechem mishneh, the kazait of the chilas matzah. We're not sure if it's the broken or the upper one. Then we should have two kazaysim, from the broken and from the upper. I would think to choose first to have the kazait of the broken. First, you definitely finished the kazait of that, and then have another kazait of the upper one. And only the conductor of the Seder, only the one who made the actual bracha of Amot Tzedach Minatz and Achilas Matzah, and is now eating the kazait, only he has to have two kazaisim. All the rest need to have a kazait and a piece of the lechem mishneh, like he gave out in the beginning when he broke it up quickly into pieces and distributed it to everyone. That's enough for the lechem mishneh, and have a whole kazait of matzah, not from the person conducting the Seder, because you don't have a kazait for each one. He doesn't have that. So they use matzahs that were on the table during Shulchan Aruch. It's best to have them on the table during the entire Haggadah, covered, because we don't want to have, well, actually, some parts we uncover them, but we don't have them exposed when you say Borei Paragafen. Then you have to have them covered. But as long as they're on the table, they also gain the definition of lechem oni from another point of view, lechem she'onim alav dvarim arbeh, that we speak over it a lot, which is the Haggadah. We say the Haggadah over the matzah. That's part of the requirement of being a kosher matzah to fulfill the mitzvah of achilas matzah. There was matzah that was on the table, and we said the Haggadah over it. So it's best if you leave all the matzah that's going to be distributed later on to the family, or families that are around the table. It's best to have it on the table and not just bring it from the kitchen for Shulchan Aruch. And then each one takes the kazait of that, and then they just break off a piece from the upper matzah and get a piece of that as well, and then they're covered totally. They don't have to have two kazaisim. Only the conductor of the Seder who said the bracha of achilas matzah over those matzahs that he has in his hand, since he does not sure which one is the one to say that when he said over it the achilas matzah, he has to have kazait from both. That's how we finalize that part of the Seder. And the fact that we left open of the distance between Kiddush and the Suda, we say in Kiddush and Suda, says Shlomo Zalman, since we did the Yachatz, we broke the middle matzah from the very beginning of the Seder, that's as if we began the Suda. That starts off the Suda because we prepared the matzah to be eaten much later on as the broken matzah of Lechem Oni. And besides that, since Lechem Oni is Onim Alav Dvarim Arbeh, we have both actions now. We broke it to be like Lechem Oni of a poor person, and we were saying the Haggadah, there should be something that we say over it a lot of things. So we're preparing the matzah from the very beginning, right after Kiddush, we're preparing it for the Suda. How are we preparing it? A, by breaking, so it's Lechem Oni of the first pshat, that it's like a poor person's bread. And we're saying over the Haggadah, which is the second pshat. So we can't start the meal without these preparations. So it's as if we began the meal. That's why it's Kiddush. It's all connected. That's one way. That's to answer that question. To answer the second question we had, how come we don't say Ala Gefen Priya Gefen, Bracha Achrona, over the first cup of wine, since we're going to be interrupting with 2 hours or so of Haggadah before we eat the next bite of matzah? How can we then disregard the bracha achrona over that cup of wine? So here Shlomo Zalman says the following: we really should be saying Ala Gefen Priya Gefen over the first cup of wine. There's no halachic good reason why not to. Problematic not to, because we're missing out on a bracha achrona, which then disappears from, we can't do it anymore. But he says that if we would say bracha achrona, it would make it seem like a disconnect from the Seudah. It's like when you drink a cup of water, you say Borei Nefashos, then that's it. It's disconnected from anything else you eat or drink. So if we would say Al-Gefen, it would seem like a disconnect between a Kiddush and Seudah, and that's not allowed. We have to have Kiddush and Kom Seudah. But that's still not enough. It's a good enough reason why not to, but it's not a good enough reason. How do we cope with the fact that we're not saying Bracha Achrona? We drank a cup of wine. 2 hours later, we'll start eating something else. How do we cope with the fact that halachically we're missing out on a very important halacha to say a Bracha Achrona over the wine? So it says in the books that there were some years that Shlomo Zalman used to whisper to himself, he felt that it's more important to say the Bracha Achrona than to look like an interruption between Kiddush and Seudah. And he whispered to himself the Bracha. With that out loud, he didn't make everyone else say it, but to himself he did it. The better way that he chose in other Sdarim, other years, was that once in a while, he used to munch a piece off of the karpas. He had the karpas, which is less than a kazait. And by the way, he himself did not use baked potato like many Ashkenazim use. They dip baked potato into the salt where he did his karpas. That's counteracted to what you really are looking for. That fills you up. You're supposed to have something that opens your appetite, not fills you up. The whole idea of karpas is to open your appetite. It's like rich people who have appetizers before they eat the meal. So he dafka had a raw vegetable, like he's take a cucumber, just a raw cucumber, and cut off a piece less than a kazait. You don't need a whole cucumber, you need less than a kazait. In order, by the way, why less than a kazait? Not to get into the same exact problem of bracha achrona. We're saying the karpas bor priadama in order to also solve the issue of maror, having to say hadama or not. So we solve it by saying hadama before the meal. But if you would have a full kazait, we should be saying Borei Nefashos over it. So definitely don't have a full kazait for that. Just have a little piece of karpas. And as the Seder was going on in the different parts of the Gada where you're allowed to munch on something, not in the middle of a bracha or something of that sort, you used to munch on that cucumber, drop here, drop there, I guess in intervals of half-hour intervals between each munch, between each bite. And then that kept him going. Anytime you keep on sipping or eating something, even a drop, after you've eaten a kazait or drunken a revit of beverages or food, then you get the clock to count it half an hour over again. It starts over again. The clock gets reset.
Can't you say glass of wine?
No. Glasses of wine you should not, because of what we said before. Within the Seudah, you can have as much wine as you want, but between the two cups, you should not have wine in the middle, because it looks like you're adding to the kosot. You're adding more than the amount of chazal required of 4 kosot. So best to have that piece of karpas, or whatever it is. Once in a while, take a little bite from it, and then that restarts the clock of half an hour, and then until you reach a motzi lechem, and then you're fine to go. And then you have a birkas hamazon covering everything you ate before. So that, or drank. So that's the way to do it. Okay, we went way overboard. But these are important halachic discussions. There are many more to do. One last point. As David said before, David Levine, that we're not supposed to speak as we eat the kazait matzah. It's not only for the kazait matzah, actually. Best is, if we're able to, it's a little bit difficult, but try your best, not to speak until you finish korech. Why? Because according to Hillel, that's the main achilas matzah, is the korech. That's how you see it, zechla mikdash. So when we say amotzi lechem and al achilas matzah, we're including the korech. And if we speak between, so we're interrupting between achilas matzah and the korech. And then it's not useless because we're still fulfill the mitzvah, we don't have the bracha over that mitzvah. So for that reason, before you even go wash, for hamotzi and matzah and maror and korech and seudah and everything, before you go wash, the best is to pause a moment. You finish the Agada, the main section of the Agada. Everyone's ready to run to wash because they want the meal finally. You pause a moment and you start distributing everything that's necessary for the family before you go wash. the amount of matzah each one is supposed to eat, the amount of mar each one is supposed to eat, the amount of korach each one is supposed to have. Best if you set up everything before you even go wash, or at least you have everything available to you on the table before you go wash, so that when you do distribute it, as the mitzvahs go ahead, you don't need to say anything, you don't need to talk. And then the moment you say Amotzi Lechem and Achilas Matzah, then you start the sequence of Achilas Matzah, Achilas Mar, and Korech without talking all the way through. And not only do we not talk, Shlomo Zalman even was careful not to say the line before Korech, Zecher LaMikdash Kehilel Shaya Korech Matzah Maro V'Ochlam Yachad Lekei Ma Sheneimar Al Masot U'Morim Yochluhu, and then eating the Korech. Even that's an interruption. So what do? He ate the korech, and after finishing the kazait of matzah and mar together, then he said zechel midash kihilel. Meaning what I just ate, what I had just eaten, that was zechel midash kihilel. He said it beforehand. So even that he took out of the sequence because he felt it's an interruption. So this is a little bit of a chumrah. I agree. I agree it's a little bit of a chumrah. Definitely not to speak during the kazait, the first kazait, and possibly two for the one who's conducting the seder, choose kazayim, not to speak at all. That's definitely a requirement. And the women and kids should try to eat the whole kazay without talking. After that, it's a very more of a chomer not to speak until after korech, but that's the way he did it. I don't want to go all the way with the Shla Kadosh, who held in general not to say any word of chulin during this night because it's such a holy night. So even during the meal, not to talk about anything but Torah and Zmiros, and just discuss that. But not only that, not only because of the Shla Kadosh, the opinion of Rashi and Rashbam, a very, very singular opinion of the Rishonim, was that the mitzvah achilas matzah, the mitzvah required to eat that night, is not the kazait we had in the beginning, and not the second kazait, and not the korech. It's the very last kazait of Afikomen. According to Rashi and Rashbam, that's the mitzvah achilas matzah of the night. So according to them, when you said al achilas matzah at the very beginning, you're supposed to not interrupt with talk between that bracha and all the way to the Afikomen, because it really goes on the Afikomen. But that's something that's really impossible to go all the way there. I guess Rashi was able to, but we're not Rashi. So, okay, so we'll stop at this.
Brought one of the Afikomen prize from his grandfather from Zaydi Rashi. He had a piece of white also.
Right, that's why I held the same way, right? Okay, so have a great month and Pesach, Kasher v'Sameach, and Zat Hashem, I'll send notice when we'll resume our shiurim on Zoom, probably partially at least, and Zat Hashem, have a Geulah Shlema, all of us.
Thank you.
Okay. To you. Bye-bye.